Good hello. Whenever this is, not legal advice, please like, subscribe, share, comment, share with your plants, animals, send me a line. Everybody be well. Today I wanted to talk about a little bit Alpine, the SEC, and MMAT, some jokes, and the like. And just so you know, I've kind of structured my jokes. So we do some at the start, but the good ones, the really, really good ones are at the end. So if you want to hear how good those good ones are, you have to stay to the end. But before we get there, please don't rely upon anything is said here today. Hopefully, it will provide you some thought-provoking information, and we will go from there. And if anybody comments, I will read all comments and will respond if I can respond intelligently, which is not often. So, what's the difference between death and taxes? Today, we're going to have more of a political viewpoint on some of our humor or attempted humor. So, what's the difference between death and taxes? Congress doesn't meet every year to make death worse. 2 years, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but 2 years ago, my brother ran for Congress. So my friend asked me, what does he do now? My response was nothing. He got elected. And last but not least, in this first round of amazing jokes, what do corrupt Congress people order for lunch on election day? Of course, stuffed ballots. What else? So, wanted to first talk about a little bit about Alpine and kind of my premise about the SEC. So, Alpine, just to remind everybody, Alpine's a prime broker for GTII. GTII is a security that's basically a shell, and it is apparently heavily shorted. Alpine has a checkered history, and people attached to it have a checkered history. Including their location. But I kind of wanted to go through it and show you kind of what really is the problem. And there's proceedings involving Alpine. There's a court case, an appeal set for oral argument February 8th, 2024 in DC. The outcome of that will determine whether Alpine is proceedings continuing to get rid of Alpine go forward or stop, or whether different types of proceedings have to go on. So that's what's going on. Now, just to kind of tell you what's permitted. So this is going to tell you, in essence, what the SEC and FINRA will tolerate, because Alpine is the epitome of the worst case scenario, in my opinion. So Alpine, between 1984, and this is for the record, so I went through documents that were publicly available, and from 1984 through 2022, Alpine was the subject of dozens of either convictions or admissions of guilt or responsibility with regard to dozens of violations. So this wasn't the case where they committed some misconduct and there were 35 bad acts, and I'm referring to that as dozens. No, this is that on dozens of separate occasions, they were either found responsible, liable, guilty, or admitted to misconduct from a period of 1984, interesting time, through 2022. And a lot of that included claims of misappropriation, not just claims, but misappropriation means they took money, overcharged, failure to supervise, and numerous acts of misconduct. Yet, notwithstanding that and the harm to the public, the SEC and FINRA let that continue. That included a prominent member of Alpine who had direct contact with the regulators from being involved with Alpine. And why shouldn't he have been involved with Alpine is because he had been convicted of a sex crime. Not only had he been convicted of a sex crime. He admitted to that sex crime. And after that admission, so Alpine has this guy, he's working for them for years. He deals with the regulators, I believe, as to the issues involving shorts, etc. He's convicted of a sex crime. After this, Alpine tries to have him appointed basically as their point man to all the regulators officially. Now, amazingly enough, the SEC turns him down. However, they do nothing to shut down Alpine, and they let Alpine continue. Now, we had, in addition to that, so we have, literally thousands and tens of thousands of violations. And during that time, one of the problems was Alpine was convicted and it was sustained on appeal for thousands of violations of the Bank Secrecy Act. And they were fined $12 million for that violation. I believe that was affirmed in 2021. I don't believe the fine's been paid. I don't believe that the SEC has tried to collect that fine. The Bank Secrecy Act was designed to prevent money laundering and to limit or try to restrict terrorism. Anybody remember 9/11? And Binance a few months ago was basically shut down because of all the Bank Secrecy Act violations. So the SEC was aware of that and did nothing, nor did the federal authorities, despite these violations of the Bank Secrecy Act. So we have literally dozens of convictions over many years for basically stealing and other misconduct. We have a sex offender working for them in a prominent role dealing with regulators. We have violations of a law that is supposed to prevent terrorism. Yet the SEC and FINRA do nothing to stop that. They let Alpine continue on. And then in 2022, we have further proceedings. I think it was February of 2022, further proceedings based upon new violations, misappropriations, overcharging, etc., basically stealing money from clients. That's what it comes down to. That's what at least it appears to come down to. Finally, the SEC and FINRA have had enough. So they bring these proceedings. There's enforcement action and a finding against Alpine again, but this time they're ordered out, subject to appeal, which is ongoing. And a cease and desist order is issued where it basically says you can't steal from people anymore because it's a really threat to the community and to consumers. So we're ordering a cease and desist order in effect February 2022. In or about, I think it was March of 2023, after approximately 3,000,000 violations of the cease and desist order, then FINRA decides at that time, after the public's been further harmed, to try to take action and try to stop Alpine from conducting any further business. Now, they don't go into federal court. They go within their own judicial system of FINRA. And we don't know, there's questions about the judicial system of both FINRA and the SEC. There's a case before the U.S. Supreme Court right now called SEC versus Jerkassi, in which the judicial system of the SEC is in question. There's an Alpine appeal that's ongoing, and there's another case called FINRA versus Kim, both in the DC circuit, that are questioning the judicial branch and authority of both FINRA, the SEC, and SROs. Those are the self-regulatory organizations like FINRA. So that's going on. But in the meantime, there's an appeal pending in the Alpine case. And that appeal relates to the expedited. We're, like 30 years in. So I don't know how any of this is expedited, but the process they chose to finally get rid of Alpine was expedited. That's what's on appeal now. But in the meantime, the SEC and FINRA could both go into federal court tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow, because tomorrow's Sunday, but on Tuesday, they could go into federal court. They could ask for a receiver, shut down Alpine based upon all the evidence of violations. But because the SEC and FINRA are trying, and this is the bottom line, they're trying to protect their power base. They're trying to protect their own judicial systems. They're trying to protect how they do business, what they get out of their business, their own administrative state. So as a result, they don't want to go to the federal courts. And the reason why in Alpine, they haven't elected to go directly to the federal court, because they believe that if they basically skip over their own judicial system, that will be evidence that will be used against them in these cases. And to them, it's more important that they protect their power bases, including their own internal judicial system, than protecting retail and consumers. And that's the reason why, as of today, in light of all the misconduct that Alpine has engaged in, they're still in business. It's because the SEC and FINRA have elected not to shut them down as they had the ability to do, because they don't want to defer to the federal court. So the Supreme Court is now hearing the Jerkassi case. We'll see about the Alpine appeal. We'll also see about the Kim appeal, because that may change how the SEC and FINRA can conduct business in the future. But the fact that these guys would permit these scumbags, and I'll let you choose which scumbags I'm referring to, is really a disgrace. Everybody knows they're committing acts of misconduct towards the public, and they should be shut down. And that's it. And so the reason that Alpine is still in business is not what Alpine is doing. It's what the SEC and FINRA have elected not to do. That doesn't excuse Alpine and the scumbags, but in essence, the SEC and FINRA are equal scumbags for letting this nonsense go on. So remember that whenever you hear Alpine, they're complete scumbags. But remember that the SEC has chosen to let them continue. Last but not least, that was a long last. The MMAT, I saw there was a settlement with the SEC for $1 million regarding the merger between Torchlight and MMAT. It has nothing to do with the MMTLP share count. The settlement was for $1 million payable in 4 installments. Since money is tight, that sounded like a lot. But I know Morgan Stanley was fined nearly $300 million. I think today I saw it, for basically using insider information regarding block trades. In other words, they would do big block trades, and as opposed to keeping that information silent, they would disclose it to their mates, and maybe their mates would act upon it. And as a result, Morgan Stanley was fined $300 million. If they were fined $300 million, you can only imagine how much money they made on it, because clearly there's no correlation between fines and profits. But anyway, so MMAT's fined $1 million payable over 4 payments. I guess the agreement is without an admission of responsibility or guilt. And just so we're clear about that, any settlement agreement, almost any settlement agreement I've ever seen had a non-admission. It's part of the package. In other words, if I pay you money, then I get off and I won't take responsibility, at least in writing. And that's kind of commonplace. So the fact that it was without admission to me is meaningless. Uh, there was a Wells notice that was outstanding. That was from the SEC saying we're investigating you. We might go after you. It was asked to the company and two individuals. It looks like the time period for the Wells notice was about to expire. So this deal apparently was to deal with that. It looks like the private individuals aren't involved in this. So it looks like perhaps they escaped without any responsibility. If that is different, we will find out about it in a short term because I think the time period for the Wells notice expires. I'm not particularly impressed with MMAT's management. So perhaps the reason for this settlement was because this was a manner in which current management could press press responsibility on prior management, or perhaps it was a legitimate resolution. But again, I don't have um, much belief, or I wouldn't vouch for current management. Also, I wouldn't be surprised in light of the financial condition of metamaterials that if there was a BK, a bankruptcy that was filed before the fine was fully paid off, I don't know in the settlement agreement if there's any reference to non-dischargeability of a BK fine. I don't know if it's in there. I didn't see any type of settlement agreement. I'm sure the settlement agreement is confidential anyway. But you couldn't put a condition in that something wouldn't be dischargeable in bankruptcy. In other words, you couldn't get rid of it in bankruptcy. But I don't know. So all in all, I saw it. I thought it was a relatively large sum based upon the cash position of MMAT. But I don't trust the current management, so I don't know what it means. If the private individuals get off the hook, I think that's nice, but we won't know that for sure. And that was my read on that settlement. I don't have a particular read in terms of responsibility. And again, I don't see it as having any connection to the MMTLP share count or that matter. I will be doing another video probably this week, or a live stream, or both, involving my arbitration and this week's events since my last one. And I may be having a live stream next Friday with a special guest that I will announce when we get there. Anyway, before I leave you, I wanted to ask you, why can't you let a politician onto a plane? Because they're always trying to destroy the other wing. And last but not least, and I think this is the best, my opinion, why do thieves never target politicians' homes? Professional courtesy. Anyway, hope you're all well. Have a great day. Any questions or comments, please put them out there. I'm happy to respond if I can. And otherwise, we'll see you another time. Be well. Take care. Hope everybody